The long-awaited update for MeshGrabber is coming. Version 4.0 will bring you scaling, strand-based hair, soft selections, sculpting, smoothing, and symmetry. MeshGrabber has been one of the most popular plugins for Daz Studio since its initial release in 2019. Initially, MeshGrabber could move vertices with a gizmo, which was already useful to quickly fix poke-through in clothing. You can select vertices, edges, or polygons in the scene, and then a gizmo appears with which you can move the selected vertices around. The gizmo will not only move the geometry that you selected, but also calculate affected vertices around the selected geometry with a fall-off circle. With version 2, MeshGrabber learned rotations. These work a little differently because in order to rotate, just dragging a gizmo along a distance is not enough. A rotation needs both an axis and an angle. In MeshGrabber, this can be done by first moving the gizmo to where the axis should be. Then use the gizmo's rotation handles to rotate the selected geometry around that axis. And with version 3, MeshGrabber could create new morphs and edit existing morphs. This has all existed for years. Here comes version 4.0 with a whole bunch of major new features. Scaling, strand-based hair, soft selections, sculpting, smoothing, and symmetry. First, the well-known gizmo has acquired little knobs for scaling. This feature has been requested by users for a long time. As with the rotations, the scaling is relative to the gizmo origin. So you can first move the gizmo to a place where the scaling center should be, and then drag the knobs to scale the selected geometry. Also, MeshGrabber now supports strand-based or dForce hair. Previously, MeshGrabber could not see the polylines that strand-based hair is built from. Now it can. You can select the vertices in the hair strands and move, rotate, and scale them like any other mesh. By default, MeshGrabber also shows the vertices that are affected by your selection as a soft selection, with a gradient that illustrates which vertices will be deformed most when you drag the gizmo. You can modify the soft selection directly to add or remove vertices that should or should not be affected, as some kind of masking for finer control what should be affected by the next move, rotate, or scale operation. A major new feature is sculpting. Inspired by Blender's sculpt mode, if the sculpt brush is active, MeshGrabber will directly pull or push the vertices under the mouse. It will use the vertex normals to determine the direction. And it acquired a smoothing brush too. This is independent of the smoothing modifier built into Daz Studio. MeshGrabber has its own smoothing implementation, similar to what is available in other well-known modeling software. With the combination of sculpting and smoothing, some modeling can be now done directly in Daz Studio. To make all of that even more useful, MeshGrabber supports Symmetry for all selection and sculpting tools along the X, Y or Z axes. This works not only on truly symmetrical meshes, but will try to find mirror vertices in any mesh through proximity matching. All of these new tools work with MeshGrabber's existing morph support. You can make morphs for dForce hair, you can make morphs from your sculpting, you can use the smoothing brush to make smoothing morphs for only a small part of the mesh without having to turn on the smoothing modifier for an entire scene node. Just as an example, one very useful use case for MeshGrabber is complicated clothing simulations. Daz Studio's dForce is fantastic and a lot of fun, but it likes to explode meshes when they intersect. With MeshGrabber you can fix such collisions before the simulation by creating a quick before sim morph. Then, after running the simulation, you can not only fix problems in the simulation result, but also smooth areas strategically without having to turn on Daz Studio smoothing modifier for everything. For advanced simulations, using the animation timeline, you can even create specific morphs that are turned on temporarily during the animation. Lots of other little things have been added, like Lasso selection and full undo for all operations, including selection changes, sculpting and smoothing, and symmetry. MeshGrabber also has a connected-only option for all selections like in Blender. Elevate your 3D game with MeshGrabber, the Swiss Army tool for geometry manipulation inside Daz Studio. Say goodbye to morph hunting and export and import for every little fix. Watch your imagination come to life effortlessly.